Hi, I'm Sue Sherman. I'm from Newmarket in Ontario, Canada. It's just north of Toronto, and I would have been local to the SAQA conference in Toronto had it taken place in its original physical location. When I first saw SAQA's call for entries for the Musica exhibit, I realized it was perfect for me. Music has been a lifelong passion. So I felt a degree of pressure to come up with a perfect musical quilt idea. Not easy, really. To me, quilts are all about the visual, and music is all about the sound, the feel, the experience. Around that time, the street artist Banksy caused an international sensation when the painting Girl with Balloon sold for $1.4 million at auction and then promptly shredded itself. For weeks afterwards, people I knew who didn't even care about art were talking about it. They were astonished by the sum paid, appalled at the disrespect, upset that a street artist would be taken seriously, intrigued by the audacity, a wide variety of opinions, including a whole lot of discussion as to whether the shredding constituted part of the artwork or not. Girl with Balloon shook things up, made everyone think, and visual art became richer as a result. That made me think about a similar disruptive moment in music, the debut of American composer John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds in 1952. It was before I was even born, but the reaction must have been similar. The debut of a new piece by a minimalist composer, 3 movements totaling 4 minutes and 33 seconds, in which the pianist was in playing position but did not touch any keys. I imagine that there were those in the audience who wanted their money back. There was certainly a great deal of discussion about whether the work qualified as music or not, and that debate continues to this day in some musical circles. My idea was to create this quilt depicting the name of the musical piece, 4 minutes and 33 seconds, as a color blindness test, in which small circles in 2 different colors are arranged so that the difference between the colors is what your eye uses to discern a letter or shape. I hand-dyed a variety of shades of red and green and fixed 2-sided fusible interfacing to the back. Then I used an AccuQuilt cutter, a die cutter, to cut out lots of perfect circles of various sizes and arrange them on the quilt, using a pure white background for contrast. Next. This slide shows how the quilt would look to someone who is red-green colorblind. As you can see, the numbers are essentially invisible, so that if you are colorblind, you would completely miss the point of this quilt, which parallels the way some people view this piece of music. And I apologize to any colorblind people watching this, as I don't have the Photoshop skills to make it so that you can see the numbers. Next. When it came to quilting the piece, I wanted to go back to basics. My message here is that the only reason disruption works as an artistic statement is because we have a standard to begin with. I needed to fill the entire shape of the quilt with quilting to depict the musical basics, and I needed to make sure the musical notation was accurate and plausible. So I created this E-flat major scale graphic, complete with pedal and dynamic markings and a cadence. It's machine quilted in white so as to take its rightful place in the background of the quilt. Next. These are some of my early quilts made using a similar raw edge applique technique, except that the pieces are cut into irregular shapes using scissors rather than die cut. They are both turtles photographed by my husband when we lived in Hawaii, and they were made using custom hand-dyed fabric and raw edge applique. I've had some success selling kit versions of these quilts to other quilters, so they are quite easy to make. Next. These days, I've been doing a lot more painting with thickened dyes directly onto the background fabric. This piece is about 50 inches wide. I love the versatility of this dye painting. I can depict almost anything and can vary the look from broad brush strokes to painstaking detail of the rocks and the feathers of these penguins. The main drawback, and it's a big one, is that there is very little scope to correct mistakes using this technique. Once this dye goes into the fabric, it is difficult, sometimes impossible, to remove. Next. This is me seated at the dining room table in February, painting a king penguin. I started by tracing the image onto the treated white fabric, and then used paintbrushes to apply the thickened dye. Like other dye techniques, you leave it to cure for 24 hours, and then wash out the spent dye. The result is a whole cloth quilt top that is essentially a piece of printed cotton fabric. The picture on the right is the same quilt being quilted in my studio on my sit-down long arm machine. I'm using matching tri-lobal polyester thread for a nice sheen, and including neon orange and yellow to make the brights really pop. Next. Some of my best quilts start with great photographs. This is a weaver bird I photographed serendipitously at the moment of takeoff above my head. I created the quilt using the same technique just shown for the penguins, with the addition of some specialty habu yarns couched to create the nest. The piece is about life size at 26 by 26 inches, and it's currently part of the Aloft exhibit with SAQA. Next. These two quilts are the same technique in the same materials, but with a different look, a Galapagos penguin and a Sally Lightfoot crab. These are small quilts, both around 18 inches in the long dimension. Next. Here's a Galapagos tortoise, also in the same technique and around 24 inches wide. Next. And a final Galapagos animal quilt, the blue-footed booby. This is around 30 inches wide.